remembered a midrash, which until now I didn't realize how it is relevant to this topic. Okay, and there is a pasuk in Kohelet. Okay, Adam echad me'elef matzati, ve'isha v'chol ele lo matzati. If I look at 1,000 men, I can find one man. But if I look at 1,000 women, I can't find any woman. Which is always, I consider to be very insulting, right? But the Midrash says, Adam echad me'elef matzati, I found one from 1,000. 1,000 children, actually meaning boys, because that's who studied in Am Yisrael from ancient times. 1,000 children enter school. Of them, 100 gets to the level that they can understand Mikra, Tanakh. Out of these 1,000, 10 get to the level that they can understand Mishnah. Out of these 1,000, one gets to the level that they can understand Halakha and teach and give decisions in Halakha. So you see that this Midrash considered that the traditional study framework was not very efficient. From 1,000 children comes only one person who knows halakha and can be a rabbi. But now we also understand why Isha bechol ele lo matzati, and they didn't find even one woman out of 1,000. Why? They didn't even start learning ever. No woman ever started learning, so they could never get to that stage. In that sense, our times, and my wife Abigail frequently says, in her lifetime, there has been a dramatic change that in a historical perspective is really a great historical change. And therefore, here we are, right? If we had been 50 years ago, none of you would be sitting here, okay? And maybe even your mothers were not in the situation that they were learning Torah, certainly not Torah Sheba'al Peh and other important topics. So what we have today is texts by three great Sephardic rabbis about this topic. And the first that we're going to look at, I don't know if it's in the same order that you have, is Rabbi Yosef Messas. Is Rabbi Yosef Messas. Rabbi Yosef Messas was born in Morocco towards the end of the 19th century. Then he went to be a rabbi in Algeria, in a small town or a small city. And when he came to Algeria, this was about 1924, and he came to a situation that was very different from that in Morocco, because almost 100 years earlier, the French had conquered Algeria. And Algeria, they did not decide that Algeria was a colony. No, they decided that Algeria was part of France. Like today, Hawaii is a state of the United States, although it's thousands and thousands of kilometers across the sea. So the French decided that Algeria is a part of the French state, although in between is the Mediterranean. And the Jews in France were very embarrassed because just recently they had convinced the French that Jews could be like Frenchmen. They were very Western, they were very developed, and after the French Revolution, indeed, the Jews received French citizenship. And now, only about 40 years later, in 1830, they come, the French army comes, we have all these Jews, they're wearing galabiot, they speak Arabic, they don't look like Frenchmen at all. So the Jews of France now had two projects. First of all, they wanted to teach the Jews of Algeria how to be good Frenchmen, and they wanted to convince the French government that although these people had never seen Paris, Marseille, Lyon, and they spoke Arabic, and they could really be also French citizens. Okay, and in fact, sometime later in 1870, all of the Jews of Algeria, never stepping on the French country in Europe, became complete French citizens. Not the Muslims, only the Jews, because the Jews of France had a lobby to convince the French to do that. So when Rabbi Massas came to Algeria, he found Jewish people who had for almost 100 years been living under French government, and for about 60 years had already had French citizenship completely. They were voting in the elections to the parliament. They were, and many of them, surprisingly, were not so much Shomer Shabbat, were not so much this, were not so much that, because they had become Frenchmen and French women. So he, in his writing of halakha, you can see very interesting ways of dealing with this situation. Okay, now, one thing that he began to do, and later he continued also when he returned to Morocco, okay, in 1939, he returned to Morocco. He was an important rabbi in Morocco, and then he moved to Israel. After he retired in Morocco, he moved to Israel, and he lived near the city of Haifa, and they invited him to be the chief rabbi of Haifa. So for several years, he was the chief rabbi of Haifa, and he passed away in 1974. So one of the things that he used to do was to give shiurim on Pirkei Avot. Okay, and there's certain times in the year that we study Pirkei Avot, and he would give shiurim on Pirkei Avot, and in one place in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Meir says, okay, you have the English and the Hebrew, the sixth chapter of Pirkei Avot, the last chapter begins, Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma, anybody who studies Torah just for the sake of Torah, zoche lidvarim harbe, gets a lot of heavenly reward, and he goes on to tell about this. And Rabbi Yosef Massas begins his shiur, and he says, just a minute, what does it mean, Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma? What does this mean? Anybody. Well, you could just say, Ha'osek b'Torah lishma. What does it mean? Kol? Kol means to include something that you might not automatically think. And he says, one of this includes women. Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma is also Kol ha'oseket b'Torah lishma, any woman who will study Torah for the sake of Torah, zochali devarim harbe, got a lot of reward. And now he tells a story. in the city of Algiers. Okay, there's a country of Algeria and the city of Algiers. In the city of Algiers, in the time of the great Rabbi Ayyash. Okay, the great Rabbi Ayyash, well, we know there was in the 17th century, in the 18th century, meaning 1740, 1750, okay, there was a great Rabbi Yehuda Ayyash, who was in fact a very great rabbi. There was a maiden who was very beautiful, the daughter of a wealthy man. A young girl, teenager, 15, 16, 18. And she was very beautiful, and her family was very rich. So what do you think is now going to happen? Get married. Oh. She was very wise in Torah and devoted herself day and night to its study. Many respected men asked for her hand. They wanted to marry her. She was beautiful and rich. Great combination. The fact that she was studying Torah wasn't so much an important factor here. Many respected men asked for her hand, but she did not at all want to marry. For the reason of Ben Azai. Okay, Ben Azai was a great Tana.
He married the Torah.
That's what he never got married. And they said to him, how can you not get married? It says, Peru urevun. He says, what can I do? Nafshi chashka batorah. My heart, my soul wants Torah, and he never got married. So she also said, I don't have to get married. Her father complained about her to the great rabbi. Why is she not getting married? What's going on here? And he, the Rabbi Ayyash, summoned her. He called her to come and spoke goodly words to her. He tried to convince her to do the normal thing that women are supposed to do, get married. But she was unwilling to obey him. Reasoning with a Kal Vachomer from Ben Azai. He was a man, and he was obligated by Torah, Peru Urevu. And nevertheless, he said, Nafshi Chashka B'Torah, and it's more important, it overrides the idea of Peru Urevu, for him to study Torah. All the more so, Kal Vachomer, she who didn't have a mitzvah of Peru Urevu, okay, as you know, for some interesting reason, okay, if you look at Sefer Bereshit, God says to man and women, Vayomer lahem, to both of them, Peru urevu. Okay, but the rabbis, for a certain logic, said no, the person that's obligated on this mitzvah, according to Torah, is only the man. So lechatchila, you didn't have to get married at all. Okay, but here we are. And the woman is saying to the Rabbi Ayyash, what do you want from me? He who had to get married according to Torah, he refused because he loved Torah. I don't have to get married according to Torah, to God. I love Torah. So Kal Vachomer, then I don't have to get married. The rabbi said to her, but you're also not obligated to study Torah. Which Ben Azai was also obligated because the rabbi said that also Peru is on the men and Talmud Torah is on the men. So the rabbi said to her, so what? You don't have to study Torah and you will get no reward. She smiled at him and said to him, he must have momentarily, it slipped your mind, Rabbi, the words of Rambam, of blessed memory, that also a woman is rewarded by God if she studies. Okay, because as you know, and this appeared also in the text that we studied over Shabbat, Gadol HaMetzuveh ve'oseh, somebody who is obligated by Torah to do a commandment, and they do it, they get sachar more than somebody who is not obligated. But if somebody is not obligated, chooses to do the mitzvah, they also get sachar. So she said, so I'm also going to get sachar if I study Torah. And then she made a dramatic, every time I read it, okay, she said, you know what, Rabbi? Even if it was the case that I would really get no sachar, no reward for studying Torah, may it be so. For she is not studying, I'm not studying Torah to get rewards, I'm studying Torah for love of Torah. So when the rabbi heard that, what could he say? He was amazed. She's right. So the whole idea, by this move, of who's making this move, actually Rabbi Massas, right? The whole question, are women chayavot to study Torah, not chayavot to study Torah, is now irrelevant. The question is, do you love Torah? If you love Torah, it's not a question if you are chayevet. Forget about that. If the rabbi was deeply moved by these words of her and parted from her with many blessings, he said to her father, enable her to do as she wishes, for by virtue of this, she will have great merit. Not sachar, but God will love her because she is loving Torah. And this will protect all the inhabitants of the city of Algiers. Now, the city of Algiers, of course, had Jews and it had many non-Jews. So it was, one day the great rabbi dreamt in his sleep that the raiders, attackers, came to the city to kill and plunder. Okay, it was common at that time that there was, along the coast of North Africa, different countries and different rulers, and ships would come like pirates or armies from the sea, especially the Spanish Navy, would come to attack the cities along the coast. So he dreamt that the attackers came and the maid and this girl went out against them with a sword and slaughtered them all, bringing great salvation. The rabbi was frightened by the first part of the dream and began fasting, because he realized some great danger is now going to come. 3 days later, on Friday night, the city was attacked by the Spanish Navy. But God, in his mercy, caused a great storm at sea, and all the ships were totally wrecked and sank like lead in great waters. Okay, from Shirat Hayam. And God saved the entire city, Jews and non-Jews, from the hands of the oppressors. Then the rabbi understood the allusion of that dream, that the merit of that woman protected the city's inhabitants. And thus she remained single. According to this story, she didn't get married. Enamored of Torah until her 60th year, when she was 60 years old. Then she went on Aliyah to the Holy Land and devoted herself to Torah until she passed away at the age of 100 years.
She never got married.
According to this story, she never got married, which raises an interesting question, of course, which I'm not right now going to answer. Okay, is it the case that there is necessarily a conflict between women studying Torah and women having a family and a husband and living in the community? Okay, so now the model here from the beginning, right, is Ben Azai. Ben Azai decided that he loved Torah so much that he wasn't getting married. But most of the rabbis got married and get married, and they study Torah. But how could they do that?
Because of the wife.
Because the wife is taking care of the children and so on. And according to the Ḥajamim, she's also working to support them, and they don't have to work. So, in this sense, the standard format of studying Torah for men is that, yes, they'll get married, they'll have children, but it's not the person who's studying Torah that's taking care of the children. Okay.
Not taking care of the children, but they used to work. Many rabbis, they used to work. And
Oh, that's correct.
not taking care of children, but they used to bring parnasa to their
Right,
home.
so first of all, yes, 100% what you're saying is true. The idea that this is a very modern notion that was invented in Bnei Brak in the 1950s. Until then, also in the most religious, learned men who studied Torah, they worked. Okay? Rabbi Ovadia Yosef never expected his wife Mangalit to go out to work to support him. He never had
That's
that.
why Benazai didn't get married if she would take care of the children and the things that would get him from study.
Well, they didn't know. It's true. At that time, no rabbi had the idea that his wife would support him. As it was, and generally speaking, in ancient times and in many places in the world today, the fact that, let's say, the husband goes out to work, but that doesn't mean the wife has nothing to do. Okay? She has a lot of things to do at home, and taking care of this and taking care of that, even if she doesn't work, certainly if she also works. Okay, but in any case, this model raises the question. First of all, the first thing that this model teaches us is that Torah Lishma, for love of Torah and not because of a mitzvah, bypasses the whole question: are women obligated? They're not obligated. Is it mitzvah ve'osa, lo mitzvah ve'osa? Forget that. The question is: do you love Torah? That's the highest level. Also, for men, if men would study only to get sachar, or you would perform mitzvot only to get sachar, okay. But that's not the real ideal, that we should observe the mitzvot because we're thinking after I die, I'll get a special chair in heaven in that corner closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? There are people who do that. And there's rabbis who all the time in their speeches say, you're going to get reward and do this and that. But the real ideal, also according to Rambam.
It's for motivation.
What?
They say it's for motivation.
Yes.
Motivate the people to do the things.
They say it for motivation, but
It's not the important thing, but it's the motivation to do it.
yes, but the ideal is after some time, as Rambam says, that people will realize that you do the mitzvot because you love the mitzvot. You love Shabbat. You love many things, and that's why you like it. Okay? I don't remember the last time that I thought, well, now I have to make Kiddush. Oh, I have obligation to make Kiddush on Shabbat, and therefore if I don't do that, I will get punishment from God. No, we all sit together at the table of Shabbat. It's very nice. Okay, but this raises, yes, please.
Explicitly in the Torah it says several times, many times, if you keep the mitzvot, you will get da da da. If you don't keep the mitzvot, you will get da da da. So Zachar ve'onesh. So why wouldn't we do the mitzvot to get a payment, even if we love them? It's explicitly said to get a payment. So why not?
Well, okay, let's say one thing that I like and we like to do, if we have time, to go and walk in nature, to see the beautiful world and scenery and everything. Okay. Now, let's say somebody would say, you know what? I'm going to pay you $500 every time you go on a hike. You should go on a hike even if you don't want to go on a hike, because I'm going to pay you money.
What if they pay me for what I want to do and I would like to do?
Okay, but
Better.
so that's a benefit. But, okay, so let's say I was working in university and they paid me to do what I like. Okay, but the truth is that now they're not paying me because I'm retired, but I'm still doing it. Why? Because I'm not doing it because of the sachar. Okay, now we'll move on. Okay, now here I see that we have a text that doesn't have English. So I will tell it to you. It's Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, also known as Ben Ish Chai. Has anyone ever heard of Rabbi Yosef Chaim? Okay, so what can you? Yeah. Okay. What can you tell me that you remember about Ben Ish Chai?
He loves segulot.
Hmm?
He loves to make segulot.
Okay.
He doesn't go according to Maran. He has his own explanation according to Wari.
Okay, so right. So Ben Ish Chai is a book that Rabbi Yosef Chaim wrote according to the order of Parashot Shavua, but it's not about Parashot Shavua. He thought what would be a basic course of Jewish halacha. And he thought that it would divide into approximately 100 shiurim, 100 parts. And then he connected each topic that he wants to teach to a certain parasha. Okay, he was very good at doing derasha, so any topic that he wanted to teach, he could get to it from any parasha. And that's why you have Ben Ish Chai Shana Rishona, first year, Ben Ish Chai Shana Shniya. That's it. Why? He finished the 100 units of study that he wanted to give. But Rabbi Yosef Chaim he wrote many other things, and he was a great rabbi. Now, he didn't work. Why? Because he had 6 brothers, and they had commercial trading. They would import and export, and the 6 brothers wrote him down as a partner in their firm. So he didn't actually work, but he was not supported by the community. He was supported by his brothers. And one of the books that some of the books were published during his lifetime. Some of the books were in manuscript. And in 1951, almost the entire community of the Jews of Iraq came to Israel. They flew them with a special agreement with the Iraqi government. They all came to Israel, and his grandson brought manuscripts of Rabbi Yosef Chaim, so sometimes suddenly will appear a book by Rabbi Yosef Chaim, who actually died in 1909, from a manuscript that was brought to Eretz Yisrael. In any case, here in this book, Rabbi Yosef Chaim is talking about Parashat Terumah. And in order to explain something about Parashat Shavua, but perhaps also in order to really tell you this story, which he now attaches to Parashat Shavua. Okay, so he says, in Baghdad there was a very rich man, and his custom was, like you said before, that the rich men, the Talmidei Ḥajamim studied. Every morning, after eating breakfast, he had in his house a room that was like a bet midrash, and his friend used to come and they used to study Chavruta until lunchtime. After lunchtime, he would go to his office and do business. And this fellow had a young daughter. And she was about 14 years old. And he wanted her to learn. And he brought for her a Talmid Chacham to study with her. And he told the Talmid Chacham, you will teach my daughter the entire Tanakh with the explanation of Rashi and Radak, and also explain the Kduk of the Hebrew language, but don't teach her Torah Shebaal Peh. And he felt that this would take, since his daughter was very clever, if she every day learned with this Talmid Chacham, after 2 years she would know it. I lied that after 2 years I would know the entire Tanakh, right? And he gave the Talmid Chacham the money in advance. 2 years salary, from the beginning he gave it to him. And the Talmid Chacham every day came and taught the daughter in one room of the house, and the other room was sitting the father with the Chavruta to study Gemara, Yerushalmi, Rambam, Rif, and so on. However, this daughter was especially talented, and therefore, after only 7 months, she learned the entire Tanakh. And now there was a problem, because this Talmid Chacham got paid for 2 years, so we have about almost a year and a half. What is he going to do? So she said, you know what, teach me Torah Shebaal Peh. So he began to teach her Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, and she immediately understood and began to learn, and she became very, very good at it. Okay, towards the end of the 2 years, until now the father didn't look, he was studying with his Chavruta, and she was studying with this Talmid Chacham, and he didn't come in to see what's going on. But towards the end, after 1 year and 11 months, he dropped in to see what's happening. What does he see? They're studying Torah Shebaal Peh, Gemara. What is going on here? He says to the Talmid Chacham, I told you to teach her Tanakh and not Torah Shebaal Peh. What's happening? He said, look, you paid me for 2 years in advance. After 7 months, she already learned the Mikra, the Tanakh. So I've said, what I'll do. So apparently also he didn't want to lose the money, right? In the next year and a half. So I started teaching her this, and you know what? She's actually very good. And the father said, thank you very much. Go away. I don't need you to give me back the rest of the money 1 month. Go away. I didn't ask you to do that. Shalom. And the daughter says to her father, Abba, I thought you would be so proud and happy about me that I'm studying, and now instead you're angry. So the father says to her, right, my dear daughter, I love you so much. What are you? Are you a boy that's going to then, after you know these things, continue learning during his whole life? You're a woman. Very soon, in a couple of years, you will become eligible for marriage, you will marry, you will have a lot of activities to do, taking care of your home and taking care of this, and therefore you will have to take care of the husband and the children, and you will not have any time to study Torah. Halevai, that one time on Yom Shabbat, once a week, you'll have time to study something of Tanakh, of Parashat Shavua. So it's a waste of time. The daughter didn't like this at all, but she didn't say anything. Because nafsha chashka b'Torah, which is the same words as ben Azai. And she said in her heart, v'tomer b'levava, ani ehye kemo Beruria ishto shel Rabbi Meir. I will be like Beruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, שהייתה בעלת תורה כאחד התנאים שהיו בזמנה. Beruria was so learned, she was just like the Tanaim. I will be like that, says this daughter. So what did she do? She saw that in this Bet Midrash, where her father sits and learns with the Chavruta, there is like a curtain. And on the other side of the curtain is a different room. And every day she went and sat in that room, and she had the book that they were studying, and she studied together with them quietly. They didn't know she was there. And she understood everything. Nothing was too complicated or difficult for her to understand. Everything that they knew, she learned. But nobody in the whole house knew at all that she was doing this. After 4 years that this was going on, there came her father and his chavuta were eating lunch. No, the father and the mother were eating lunch, and she was also sitting there. The servant came in, because he was a very wealthy person, and said, somebody is coming, they want to visit you. So the person comes in, young man, and the father says, what is your name? He says, my name is Ḥajamim ben Shalom. So the father, that's very strange. What is Ḥajamim? He says, probably that means that when he was born, his father was dead, and therefore they called him after his father. And then he said to this young man, the father said, from which city are you? He said, I'm from the same city as you. And then he said, well, if you come from the same city as me, how is Shlomo from that city? And he said, Ahar Harimonim. This person that was visiting, they said to him, how is Shlomo? He says, well, he is after the pomegranates. This seemed like a very strange answer to give. But actually, the father looked around, he saw on the table, there was a bowl of fruit that had pomegranates, rimonim. And beyond that, there was nothing. So he said, maybe that means that after the rimonim means nothing, he's nothing, the person is dead. Anyway, the father finally says to this fellow, so what do you want? Why did you come to me? He said, look, I came from a very far country, and I spent all my money along the way, and I thought perhaps you could give me some money so that I could buy some food here in Baghdad. So the father didn't have in his pocket money. So he said to the daughter, look, go to my room. In my purse, you will see coins. Here there's some simple silver coins. Choose from them 5 coins and I'll give it to this man. But be careful, there's also 5 gold coins, which are worth 10 times as much. Be careful, don't take that, only the silver coins. And she went and she took all the gold coins and she gave it to this fellow and he left. And our father didn't know that she did that. After a couple of minutes, the father was looking in his purse. He sees all of the gold coins are missing. So he said, what? I told you to give only the silver. You gave the gold. If you would be a boy, you would be working in Nishar, you would immediately lose all of your money. You would be broke. And the girl said, if I would have been born a boy, I would build 10 buildings with how much money I would make. And the reason that I gave this fellow all of this, because you didn't realize it, but this fellow is a genius. He's a great Talmid Chacham. And you didn't understand what he was saying to you. And I realized from what he was saying that he's a great genius. And therefore, I gave him all the money. If there would have been more gold coins there, I would give him more. So, father said, how did you know that? He said, look. She said, send the servant to catch him before he goes too far away. Bring him back. Ask him and discuss with him Divrei Torah. And see if he is really a great Talmid Chacham. And after you see that, I'll explain to you. So he brought it back and he began. And he saw that really this person is a great, amazing Talmid Chacham. So he gave him even more money. And he went away. And then he said to his daughter, how did you know that? She says, look. You asked him his name. He said, Haim ben Haim. You thought that his father was Haim and he is Haim. No. Because then he should say to you, Haim ben Haim. He said, my name is Haim. He didn't say Haim ben Haim. But the reason that he said that is because instead of Haim, he said, his real name is Haim ben Shalom. And because the gematria of Chacham and of Haim is the same. Because Yud and Yud is Chaf. And he was secretly, modestly trying to say that he's called Chacham, Haim ben Shalom, and you didn't realize that. Okay? And then he asked where you come from. You said the same city. But you didn't understand what he really means is that you and he both come from the place of learning Torah. And then you asked him about a certain person and he said, Ahar Harimonim. And you didn't understand that. But the reason is that it says, he wanted to say, Lo yadati. I don't know. And these are the words in Shir HaShirim that come after Harimonim. It says, Harimonim, Lo yadati nafshi shamati markevot aminadiv. And then the father admitted that she understood correctly what the secret message is, and he didn't, and he said, look, how could it mean that you, a young girl, are knowing, you understand better than us. I've been studying with my chavruta 20 years, and you have understood all this. We didn't even reach your wisdom. And she says, I was learning secretly. And I was following all of your studying. But because I was doing this secretly and quietly, my learning developed better, and therefore I achieved this status of being able to learn Torah. Now, Rabbi Yosef Chaim does not expressly say here whether he thinks it's a good idea for women to study Torah, right? So what do you think is his opinion about women studying Torah? And about men saying to them, you don't have to study Torah, it's a waste of time.
According to his writings.
What?
According to his writings.
Yeah.
He agrees.
If she
He
really
agrees that
loves
what?
That the woman studying Torah.
Okay, in other words,
it, no, if she really loves it,
And if she has the capacity to study, she has to do
She's
it.
really into it. Why not?
so when the father told this Talmid Chacham, teach her only Torah shebichtav, only Tanakh, the whole direction, the vector, the direction of the story is that the father was wrong. The father was wrong. She was right. She could do it. And she was also you see that sometimes you may hear from certain rabbis that the reason that women are not obligated to study Torah is because the mind of the women is not capable of understanding and studying the complication of Torah, especially Torah Shebaal Peh. If that's only a man's head can really understand that well, and therefore it's not appropriate for the women to do things that they really can't do it well. So why waste their time?
כל המלמד ביתו.
Torah, כאילו מלמדת תפלות. No. Well, you know the peshat of that. The peshat of that is not exactly what people believe, because the peshat of that is it's talking about parashat Sotah. That if the woman will have zechuyot from a different place, although she actually sinned,
She can say for
this
herself.
with the sachar would prevent her. So Rabbi Eliezer says tiflut means actually not good sexual activity. That if the woman would study Torah, this would give her sachar. So even if she would sleep around, she would be protected, and then people would feel okay. So that's the pshat of the context there, and
But
then
there's
people
another
took it that in
opinion.
general it's a waste of time. What?
There's another opinion that she would try to cover her misdoings, her wrongdoings,
Yes.
with her sharp mind.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. In any case,
So there are two opinions.
in any
About
case,
what is tiflut.
okay. In any case, so he himself is not saying that women, if they study Torah, would not be good at it, right? They would be. So, and obviously, Rabbi Yosef Chaim is against that, and in fact, in his family, there were many learned women, and during his lifetime, there was in Iraq a very famous scholarly woman called Frecha Bat Sasson, and she had correspondence with Rabbi Yosef Chaim about all matters of Torah, and he gave her great respect. So you see that Rabbi Yosef Chaim thinks that women can be no less Talmidot Ḥajamim than men, and the idea of men to prevent this is not relevant because women can't really do it. Now, many times, as you said before, the idea that everybody says Rabbi Yosef Chaim had many homeworld. It's true. At the same time, he was very independent-minded. If you look, by the way, in Ben Ish Chai, you see that he has many, he doesn't quote the sources. But once I went And it turned, I checked several sections of Ben Ish Chai, and I queried the sources, and many of them are from Ashkenazic sources. Because he felt that he would study all the texts and decide for himself which is the correct ones that for halakha, and that's what he did. But he also has speeches, right? In 1903, they opened in Baghdad a new building for the School of Alliance. Okay, the School of Alliance Israélite Universelle was a French school that taught a lot of secular subjects and a certain amount of Jewish subjects. And if you listen today to rabbis, you will say, oh, they are all apikosim, and all the rabbis also in Halab were against this. But my friend Yaron Harel has shown that that's not true. When Alliance first came to Halab, all of the rabbis were in favor of it. And they sent their daughters to study in Alliance. Okay, so they had this building, they opened the new building of Alliance in Baghdad, and they invited Rav Yosef Chaim to give a speech. And he gave a whole speech saying why the integration in the same school of general topics and Torah topics, that's the ideal. That's what everybody should be doing. It's so wonderful. And in fact, when it says, at a certain point he says, when it says in Shir HaShirim, okay, Semolo tachat leroshi, his left hand is under my head, v'yamino tehabekeni, and his right hand hugs me. So the pshat is, some people say there's no pshat in Shir HaShirim, but the pshat is that the man and the woman is saying how wonderful it is that the man, his left arm is under her head and he is embracing her. But according to the well-known attitude of Chazal, all of Shir HaShirim is a poem that is expressing the love and connection between Kadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael is the woman, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the man. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim says, okay, what this means is Semolo tachat leroshi v'yamino techabekeni. Semolo is general secular studies, and Yamino is Torah studies. And if somebody studies also secular studies and also this, they gain knowledge also about the entire world and also about Torah. And if you think about that, these are the two ways in which God reveals himself to us. One is through the creation, and one is through Torah. So by engaging both in general studies and in Torah studies, we are being embraced, as it were, by God.
That was the Ben Ish Chai who interpreted
That's this person. He invented this interpretation. Semulot tachat leroshi is general studies. V'yaminot tehabkeni is Torah. So you what?
Like Maseh Bereshit is like the general studies.
In a sense, if you interpret Maseh Bereshit as understanding the created world and everything that it contains, which is all general studies, because psychology is also understanding about the human being. And so all studies are, okay, so if you understand that, then you understand. Sometimes people say, well, why is it good to study secular topics? Because you could make more money. You could get a profession or anything like that. But when Rabbi Yosef Chaim says this, you realize that he's not talking about the advantage. He's talking about it is a religious ideal of how you can connect to God if you understand that the general studies is Ma'aseh Bereshit, and who is the creator of physics, of chemistry, of the human being, of agriculture, of everything is God. So when you study all these things, you're really in some way studying about God. Okay, also, in fact, Rambam says in his own way, according to his own vocabulary, that anybody that does first know physics, meaning that's the science of this world, And only if you know that, you can know metaphysics, which is the science of heavenly world. So, Rav Yosef Chaim, that's his take. So, the image that many people have of Rav Yosef Chaim, that he's some type of Hared sitting there in Baghdad, that's the way the people have constructed the image. But if you see that he has all different interesting topics, and a certain Neteshuvah in his Shelot Utshuvot, Rav Pe'alim, he says, you know, they say that if people will teach the children how to read and write French or Arabic, they will be able to become rich. He said, no, I'll tell you, that's foolish. If we would teach them to become a plumber that fixes the pipes or an electrician, they would be much more rich than just sitting in an office writing on a computer. They didn't have like programming. And then, okay, papaki. So he says that can't be the reason for studying general studies. Okay, finally, we have the last text here by Rabbi Yaakov Mizrahi. Okay, one additional reason that I'm bringing here is that he lived in South America. Rabbi Yaakov Mizrahi was born in 1888 in Beirut. Then he studied Torah in Damascus, Sham, and then he moved to Argentina. And he lived in Argentina until 1948 when he died. So if you do the calculation, you see that he died at a relatively young age of 60 years old. And he was unhappy with the fact that in his lifetime, the Jewish community in Argentina was not doing enough to enable women to study Jewish topics. Okay, they were not taking care of the Jewish education of the girls. Okay, later, 2 years before he died, there came in 1946 to Argentina Rabbi Shchebar, who then developed the whole framework of institution of learning, Jewish learning, and also girls and young women were studying there. But in his time, this didn't exist, and Rabbi Mizrahi was very unhappy about this. And he said, I'll read to you from the English, and you have also the Hebrew, which is longer. A rabbi must regard all members of the nation's body. When a rabbi thinks about the Jewish people, he shouldn't think only about the men. They should include the entire Jewish community, of which women are also part. They should not distance her, the woman, beyond the bounds of religious studies. For by doing so, the live and strong religious feeling that resides in the heart of a Jewish woman is erased. He says, naturally, Jewish women, as Jewish men, but Jewish women have religious feelings. But if they don't learn, they have no basis, like you want a plant to grow, but you don't give it any earth, any water, anything. So how can the plant grow? The plant wants to grow, but if it doesn't have the substance of doing that, which is studying and learning about Yahadut, doesn't exist. And if she is pushed beyond the bounds, we don't teach her, this will have a negative influence upon education due to the lack of knowledge and the suffocation of her religious feelings. The Jewish mother will not be able to foster, to encourage in the children's heart a living belief, that religious feeling that stands higher than material life. Judaism that is sensitive and does not recognize limits or differences permits women to be accepted to religious studies. Now you have 3 dots here, and he said, if the woman will be educated and learn it also in Jewish topics, such true piety that she will get from learning, true religious feeling, provides a strong, deep foundation for Jewish family life. A learned woman honored and admired her learned husband and regarded him with deep respect. Okay, so let's say you want to encourage good relationship between Jewish men and Jewish women. Now, how does a relationship get established and developed that the man and the woman have many things in common? And this gives them a lot to talk about, a lot to do together, a lot this. And then it's sometimes you see that the man is very interested in sports. The woman doesn't like sports at all. She goes to this, and many of the things that the man is interested, the woman isn't interested. And so what do they have to talk about? They have to talk about, okay, maybe we should get this kind of meat for lunch or that kind of meat. Okay, so Rabbi Mizrahi says, if the woman studies Torah and understands Torah, and her husband also studies Torah and understands, this will give them a lot of things to do together, to discuss. She will be able to appreciate things that he appreciates, and vice versa. One belief joined and unified the husband and wife. One was not higher and the other lower, one learned and the other ignorant. Rather, both were devoted to the one. They were joined together by God. Both were linked to him. It was thus that the learned woman strengthened her status in her home, thanks to the influence of religious learning upon her, and through which she influenced her children. By direct participation in study, she gained strength and power. תוסיף גם היא חיל וכוח. Maybe this is a hint to Eshet Hayil. Okay? And acquired new capabilities by virtue of her warmth and purity of heart. She knew well how to influence and her husband and her entire family, her sons and her daughter's husband, to follow the paths of Torah and command. So here is in fact the position of religious leadership of the family and the ground for encouraging the entire family to be close to Torah and God.
Like Chochmat Nashim Bana. Chochmat Nashim.
Banta Beita. Okay, but Chochmat Nashim,
Ken.
there in the original you might think that she knows how to sew and cook. So he said, no, the more the woman is learning in Torah, this will be a great benefit to her husband and her entire family. And then he says, and I'll read it in Hebrew, and it's here, but you have it also in English. HaTorah natena reshut la'isha yehudit. Torah permitted the Jewish woman la'alot gam lemadregat rabbanit mora horaot. Mora horaot means she's giving psak halacha. So I don't know when he's writing this, but it's certainly before 1948. Why?
No, there's no Israel.
1948 he died.
Oh.
So he's writing this before 1948. At that time, even Reform didn't allow women to be rabbis. There was no, on the first Reform women in when the world in 1972 in the United States, they allowed women to become rabbis. And here he is a Sephardic rabbi in Argentina, maybe around 1940. And he says, "Torah natena reshut la'isha yehudit la'alot gam lemadregat rabbanit mora horaot." A woman can become a rabbi who makes halachic decisions for people that ask her, "Im reuya hi lechach," if she is worthy of this, meaning she learned אין מעצור על דרכה זו. There's nothing that should stop her from this path. ואומנם היו נשים כאלו שעלו למדרגה רמה כזו, ויותר מזה גם בדורות הראשונים, גם בדורות האחרונים. Excuse me? He doesn't say names.
Aquí lo tienes en inglés.
No, she wants you to translate it.
To translate. Okay, excuse me. So I'll read it here. The Torah permitted women to rise up to the position of a rabbinic decision maker. If she is worthy of it, there is nothing that blocks her way. Indeed, there were women that attained to such a high level, and even more both in early and in more recent generations.
Like Torah Navia.
So, what we see from all of this is that the story of Kohelet, Isha bechol ele lo matzati, it's not necessary. It was the situation in previous generations that only boys studied, but it's not necessary. And here we have three great rabbis, right? And in the Shabbaton we saw Rabbi Yaakov al-Ghazi with Eshet Haim. And we see that there are grounds within the tradition, and in this case, I brought Sephardic sources because it's even Sefarad, right? So we see that there are grounds within the tradition that women can study. It's great if they study. There's not the idea that a woman's mind can't understand Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that the men who were unhappy about that, the first story, the father of this girl in Algiers was unhappy. She wants to study Torah. The rabbi, when he spoke to her, said, she's like Ben Azai. What can I say? She learns Torah because she loves Torah. Also, the young girl, as defined by, in the story of Yosef Hayim, gets much more clever than her father in understanding this. And finally, Rabbi Yaakov Mizrahi, who says explicitly that women can become Poskot Halacha, Morot Hora'a. And therefore, I now, if there's any questions.
No questions, one comment.
Yes.
According to the halacha, women are allowed to study Tanakh, halacha, Torah Sheba'al-Peh, Torah Sheba'al-Peh, but women are banned up to today to study certain things, Gemara, for example, Talmud, for example. So it would be, I'm proposing the other side of what you proposed. It would be transgressing a Torah, a halacha, a mitzvah shelo tase. It would be.
Okay. So
it would be transgressing a mitzvah.
So yes, so I understand that what you said expresses.
I wouldn't be here if I did not agree with you.
What you said expresses certain views in halakha. Obviously, these three foolish rabbis didn't know about that, right? Rabbi Yosef Massas foolishly didn't know about that. And Rabbi Yehuda Ayash, who said to the woman, what can I say? Nafshecha chka b'Torah, you do it for love of Torah. That's wonderful. And she saved the whole city from danger because God gave her. Okay, so they didn't know about it. Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad foolishly didn't know that women shouldn't be studying Torah. The father thought that. In the story, the father thought that women should be studying, but you see that from the continuation, the father realizes that it was not true, and that the daughter became much better than him in Torah. So maybe that's one reason some rabbis don't want women to study. And finally, Rabbi Yaakov Mizrahi, who says women can become morot halacha, poskot halacha. They can become, now how? They certainly can't do that if they don't study Torah Sheba'al Peh and Shulchan Aruch and Shelot Teshuvot and so on. So we see that, or in Shabbat we taught Rabbi Israel Yaakov El-Ghazi, who says Eshet Chaim, and in the Eshet Chaim it says Piha patcha b'chokhmah. She opened her mouth with wisdom, and he says that means that she decided halachic decisions even without asking the rabbis at all. So what we can see is that, okay, there's one group of rabbis or one opinion that hold this, and there's one group of rabbis that think like these rabbis that we saw here. And therefore, how do we know which group of rabbis is correct? That you have to decide for yourself. Of course, there's no third rabbi who is more important than everybody else, and God is not going to come from heaven. Lo b'shamayim, right? So there's this opinion, and there's that opinion, and here are all these rabbis holding it. Now you have to decide which way you are going.
Or we don't ask the rabbis.
What?
We don't ask the rabbis.
Okay, תודה רבה.
Thank you so much.